The information provided on this podcast is for general information purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your qualified health provider with any questions you may have. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. Reliance on any information provided here is solely at your own risk.
Welcome. This is Birth, baby. Your hosts are Sierra Morgan and Samantha Kelly. Sierra is a birth doula, hypnobirthing educator, and pediatric sleep consultant.
Samantha is a birth doula, childbirth educator, and lactation counselor. Join us as we guide you through your options for your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum journey. All right, today we have our Mother's Day episode, and Samantha and I have both of our moms coming on to talk with us. So first, we're going to go into my mom's story of having me. So this is Eve, my mom. Do you want to say hi to everybody?
Good morning. Hello. I don't.
All right, Samantha's going to question you about your birth with me. So go on, Sam.
I'm very excited to chat with you about this because I always tell my clients I feel like the birth story is kind of a setup for like how your kids are when they're growing up a little bit. So I'm curious to see how your birth with Sierra was, so I can I don't know,
Judge
investigate
me.
further, judge you a little bit. Exactly, exactly. So tell me about what it was like when you found out you were pregnant and what those kind of early days of pregnancy were like.
Well, I was 18, barely out of high school. So I did not know I was pregnant. I was on birth control and I took it fairly regularly. I missed 2 days. So
Yep.
I didn't really know I was pregnant. I didn't assume I was pregnant, but I started experiencing symptoms, a lot of nausea, just mostly that, and just kind of feeling out of sorts, not as much energy as usual. And my friend one night, I was at her house spending the night, and she said, maybe you should take a pregnancy test. So we went and we bought a pregnancy test and we came back home and I took the test and lo and behold, it was positive. And you're not to get pregnant. You're not expecting to get pregnant. You're 18. So it was a lot to take in the moment because literally between the first moment of, hey, you might be pregnant to you're pregnant was maybe an hour. So I was laying on my stomach on her bed and my feet were kind of in the air. And I think I was thrilled mostly, like unexpectedly thrilled. But of course, there was fear mixed in that because what am I going to do? How am I going to tell my parents? And it was a little bit of a tug of war between being allowed to be as happy as I felt and then having to balance that with other people's disappointment. Like, I hate to put it that way, but your parents
Yeah.
aren't happy when you're 18 and you get pregnant. So I had a big, I wouldn't even say hill, I would say a big mountain to climb in terms of how my family handled it. I was straight A student. I had been just like the good girl. So even though
Right.
I was a little bit of a rebel, I was always doing the right thing. And so I guess that would sum it up. Mostly thrill, but I wasn't even really allowed to express that all the time because there was
No,
so much else I had to handle also, knowing
yeah.
how the adults in my life were feeling.
It's funny because knowing what I know about you, mom, and like how much of a I'm gonna do it and I'm reasonable and logical and like so my mom is just a doer. It's just there's no ever not ever a question. It's just we're gonna do whatever it is that's in front of us and we're gonna win. Like we're gonna do it well. And so it's funny that you as being like pretty responsible person in general, feel like you let yourself be excited about being pregnant at 18 is kind of surprising
That
because
was my
that's not
first
the logical
emotion.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but that was my first emotion was like overwhelming joy. I was just happy about it. But I also knew that there was going to be a lot to deal with,
Yeah.
in other emotional realms with, the people that were still caring for me as I'm now going to say I'm going to have a baby.
Yeah.
So, and I had friends that said, you better get an abortion or I'm not going to be your friend.
Mm.
I mean, it
Wow.
wasn't just the adults in my life. It was friends that were really afraid of where this was going to take my life.
Mm.
Wow. And I think you said this, but were you still in high school when you found out you were pregnant? You had just graduated?
No, I was in my first semester of college.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's even
Yeah.
scarier because then you're like in this kind of in between place too.
Yeah, it was an in-between place. I mean, you're transitioning into, hey, these are going to be my college years. And then
Psych.
exactly,
Yeah.
psych. I mean, I finished that first semester of college and then I didn't go back until I think you were like 4
Wow.
when I went back full time.
Yeah.
And so what was the what were your like early pregnancy symptoms? Were you very sick or was it pretty easy for you?
I was very nauseous and
Mm,
very tired. I mean, I'm an energetic person, and I can just remember I don't nap. If I'm going to take a nap, I'm sick.
hmm.
Um, but I slept all the time, just tired. But all in all, the pregnancy itself was great. I felt beautiful. I went from the teenager with no appetite to, you know, trying to control my appetite, and from wearing skimpy clothes to, back then, you when you were pregnant, you didn't wear tight t-shirts and accentuate your belly, and everything was hidden under like big tent clothing. So that was uncomfortable for me. I remember, like, when I think Sierra was, maybe it was 3, 4, 5 years later, Demi Moore was on the cover of Vanity Fair magazine, nude, pregnant. You remember that photo if you've ever
Yeah.
seen it?
Hmm.
And I thought, oh my, it's what I wanted when I was pregnant. Like, I wanted to be able to wear a t-shirt and you're just like covered up. You didn't get to really celebrate. And I
Hmm.
felt beautiful. I mean, I loved being pregnant, loved every minute of being pregnant, except for the clothing. You,
And you had some food aversions, right? Like some pretty big ones.
that's true. I went from being, you know, eat a hamburger and French fries, and maybe that's all you ate that day. I couldn't eat meat. I couldn't stand the smell of meat. And
Wow.
here you go. If my stepmom was cooking meat because I was living with my parents, I would go to the farthest corner of the house and stick my face in a pillow. I became a vegetarian when I hated vegetables. Absolutely
Wow.
hated them. And now you talk about a link between mother and baby. Sierra was very much like vegetable, and ate way so differently as a young child than I did as a young child. And I felt like knowing her when she was born, I felt like my appetite when I was pregnant was in sync with her her appetite, not mine.
Yeah.
And you had, I think shrimp you said you could eat, right? Like that was one of the only things. And I love shrimp.
I
And
craved shrimp.
corn
I
on the
I
cob was another one.
Vegetables, peanut butter. Um, I mean, literally, my whole way of eating went out the door.
Hmm.
I didn't even want it. It was awful, like an awful idea to me. But all the vegetables and eating shrimp. Yes, I craved shrimp and peanut butter and jelly and just no
And then she
meat.
would,
I
and then
did
she would
not eat meat.
sneak into the kitchen at night, right, Mom, and grab a, what was that called?
I thought you said I didn't have to say anything I didn't want to. Just kidding.
That's what I'm saying. Because every night she would like go get this treat out of the freezer.
I would go into the freezer at like 11 o'clock at night, and my stepmom always had these like individually wrapped brownie fudge sundaes.
Nice.
And I would have one of those every night before well, maybe I would fall asleep and wake up and go get it, depending on the night, but I always had one.
See, this is your
Oh,
Yeah.
fault that I have such a sweet tooth. This is why I
Yeah,
wanted to
good.
bring it up. I can't even take responsibility for it. It's you.
N-
Vegetarian sweet tooth.
yeah,
That's right.
exactly. Yeah.
That's so funny.
But
It
the
is really
pregnancy
funny
itself
how,
was great. I didn't really have health problems at the very end. I like during labor, I had, and I don't even know what you call it, but my blood pressure would just went through the roof
oh, yeah,
during
like
labor.
preeclampsia.
Is that what that is? And but that's it. The pregnancy was amazing. I loved every second of it.
And so, like, I know kind of the standard of care has changed over the years. So, like, how often were you seeing an OBGYN, and how often were you going to see them? What do you know what you remember what that looked like? Did they do ultrasounds?
They did, but they only did one, and they wouldn't do it until you were, I think, 5 months pregnant.
Okay.
So I don't really remember exactly how often I went, but yes, I had care. I think it was just like at 3 months, and then at 5 months you went and you got your ultrasound.
Mm.
Um, I
Were
think
you
as you
able to
got
find out
toward
the sex?
huh?
I know you didn't. I don't think you found out the sex of me before I was born, right? But were you able to if you wanted to?
Well, what they said at 5 months was we can't tell. It could be a boy or a girl because they didn't see a
Oh,
penis. And but they said it could have not dropped yet. So they were just like not
Ambiguous about it.
specific, yeah. But
interesting.
I thought you were going to be a girl at that point.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And
Yeah,
so,
and I think most of what I did was outside of the doctor's office. You know, they would send me go take this parenting class, probably because I was 18,
mm,
and go do a Lamaze. It was called Lamaze class. Is there a Lamaze class anymore?
yeah,
There
Lamaze
is,
still
but it's
exists.
different.
There is.
Yeah.
It's
And
evolved.
yeah, and your biological dad was in the army in Germany, so uh my stepmom was my Lamaze partner. And
Wow.
through the whole thing, I was saying, I want to go natural. I don't want to get an epidural. I don't want any of that stuff. And so we did all this practicing, and she agreed, yes, when you go into labor, I'm gonna coach you, and you're gonna make it through it. And then labor started, and it was like the first 10 minutes of bad labor. And you don't have the training that you guys help people with these days. I listened to Sierra talk about this stuff, and there was there was no awareness of any of these techniques when I was going through it.
Yeah.
So all I remember is labor was getting intense, and my stepmom was leaning over me going, you can have an epidural if you want. Oh my gosh, you're not supposed to say this to me. But, ultimately ended up having a C-section after like 20 hours or something like
Spoiler
that.
alert. We're not
Huh?
there
Spoiler
yet.
alert.
He said,
Oh,
Yeah.
spoiler alert.
oh, sorry. I didn't
Tell
get
us about
coached well enough.
oh, she just blamed us. Did you hear that?
Oh no.
Tell
I think
us
that was you.
about when you were going into labor, because I thought that your story of like not
Mm.
knowing if you were in labor and going into labor was kind of fun.
Yeah, I was overdue by, I think, 2 days, and your biological father was here from Germany, and we were out at a shopping mall all day, walking around. And I was very modest, but I kept feeling like I had to go to the bathroom. And, my back was hurting, and, just feeling low pressure, but I was interpreting it as having to go to the restroom. So as we're walking through this mall, I kept having to say, I need to go to the restroom. I need to go to the restroom. And so we go through the whole day. We get home. it's been a huge day. Everything these days they would tell you not to do on, and it's like 11 o'clock at night, and I walked into the laundry room to do something and my water broke. And boy, did labor came on fast after that, because I think I'd been in labor all day.
Wow.
And what was
Yeah.
it like getting to the hospital and like did you go right away? And when you got there, like
We
did you
went
get the
right away.
epidural when Grammy said to?
We went right away, and I remember it being a very sterile, like almost felt like a jail cell with a bed in it, like with a
Mm.
plastic wrap over it. There was nothing comfortable about this room. And they made me get an enema,
Yeah.
which
That's
again, my
right.
modesty, and I'm at this point, I'm 19 and I don't want people doing this to me. And just, I remember at this point, um, fear. The pain was coming on. I didn't feel prepared. I didn't know how, even though I had taken those classes, I didn't feel like I knew how to handle this.
Yeah.
And I also don't think my coach was prepared to handle it, hence her throwing the epidural idea at me very prematurely. Um, but yeah, I mean, at this point, it was a lot of discomfort, not only with the environment, but uh, with the things that were being done to me, and with, what was happening to my body.
And did they
And
make you
maybe
like
that's
stay
why
in
my
the
blood
bed?
pressure went up. Uh, yeah, nobody ever
Yeah.
said you want to get up and walk around. It was maybe we'll lay over on your side, or let's, but nobody was, I've seen what you guys do with helping the mom with rubbing her back, or pushing in certain places, or having them move around, or putting them in positions that you feel like
Mhm.
nobody did anything like that.
Yeah.
I don't even think it was conceptual notion even at that time. Um, but
Was my
it,
bio
it, it
dad
was,
there?
yeah.
You know what's funny is I've always known that he was walking around with you at the mall, but my
Mhm.
brain, when I've envisioned the stories that you've told me about having me, I've never seen him there. So I didn't realize that he was in the room
Mm.
when you
It's
were in
funny
labor.
because when I visualize everything that's going on during those moments or those hours, the only person I can think of is my stepmom, Donna.
Huh,
Yeah.
I don't think of him at all. I don't think he like
right.
Yeah. Because he didn't take any of the classes with
Grampy.
you.
No, and I don't even think he was in the room most of the time. I think he and my dad, men were
Mhm.
outside.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't. I mean, I imagine if he had taken the Lamaze class with me, he would have been there. But based on our circumstances, he took a passenger seat,
Mhm.
and Donna
Yeah.
took the driver's seat.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
makes
So
sense.
it was a very scary. It was not a pleasant experience. It was very scary, and I felt very out of control, unable to help myself, unable to even be able to ask for something that I would need. I didn't even know what I needed. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I don't know what else I can say about that. It was pretty out of control.
Yeah. So you were laboring in the room, and did you decide to get that epidural pretty early then when she suggested it?
Not right then, but probably within an hour or an hour and a half, I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then at what point you mentioned earlier that your blood pressure started going up. When did that start happening? Was it like as soon as you got there or?
It was up when I got there.
Mm,
And then at the time that they took me for a C-section, it was like an emergency C-section, because I was hearing everybody talking in the background, and I was exhausted. And
hmm.
so really, I can't even think visually at this time. I think I was laying there with my eyes closed, just listening. And I
Yeah.
was hearing them say she's going to have a stroke, and like they
Oh,
were just,
wow.
yeah, it was like
Really high.
escalating. And
Yeah.
so they took me for a C-section because of it. Um,
It was like 19 hours of labor, right? Before that happened.
yeah, 19 or
And do you know
20.
how many centimeters you were?
I only got to, I think, 3 or 4 in
Oh,
that
wow.
entire time. Yeah, it
So
was
interesting.
uh,
My
it was
doula brain is
disappointing.
immediately like thinking through like, oh, well, if she
I
said she had
bet.
back labor and she said she had all this like pressure and I bet that baby was
Mm-hmm.
OP and then her blood pressure was going up and she probably went into labor earlier because her blood pressure was going up and her body knew that baby needed to be born and
Well, I
that's just
was
what I'm
a
thinking
little
through.
late at that point. I wasn't early. I was just a couple days late. But yeah, it was the pregnancy was a joy, and the delivery was like
Hmm.
the complete opposite. It
Mm.
was so much like fear and chaos.
Were you awake for the C-section? You were. Was Grammy in there?
No, she wasn't in there. I um they didn't want to put me to sleep for the
Hmm.
C-section, and you know me, I have no stomach for medical things. So they were telling me, okay, we're going to cut through this. And I kept like saying, stop telling me. I don't want to know. I don't want
Yeah.
to know what you're doing. And I said, and as soon as you deliver the baby, please put me to sleep. My anxiety was through the roof. I didn't want to have to be awake for any more of this. And then so everyone's kind of quiet. They're talking quietly. I've got a screen in front of my face. If I wanted to, I could have looked up at a mirror to see what they were doing. I had no desire. And my anesthesiologist, I don't know what his name was, but he was the most amazing person for me that entire time. He was so calming and sure of himself, and just made me feel like everything was going to be okay.
Mm.
So all of a sudden, I don't even know how close they are to delivering Sierra. And all of a sudden, I heard somebody say, "Oh my gosh, she looks like an 8 pounder." Or I think they said 9 or 10 pounder. And they didn't say she, they said it looks like, I'll just say 9 pounder. And I'm going, is it a boy or a girl? Is it a boy or a girl? And somebody said, oh my gosh, she just peed on me. And then I'm trying to then, with all this excitement now that I'm feeling, I'm trying to tell the anesthesiologist, I don't want you to put me to sleep. I was wrong. But it's like all I can picture at this moment is this mask coming toward me and covering up my face. And that's it. I heard it looks like a whatever pounder. And oh my gosh, she just peed on me. And
And then they put you
that's
out.
all that. And then I was out.
Oh my
And
Oh,
gosh.
Mom, I didn't know
then,
that.
And it was because you
yeah.
had been asking for
Oh,
it beforehand, I
Well,
guess.
yeah, he thought he was doing what I wanted. And like,
Mm.
when things are happening, I mean, he had promised me. Maybe
Hmm.
I should have not been so literal with him. Like, as soon as they deliver the baby, put me to sleep. He was doing what I said, but then I changed my mind and I couldn't get the words out before he did that. And you go to sleep so quickly.
And he was probably so proud. He's like, I just took such good care of this mom. I did
And he
exactly what
did.
she wanted, and
He
he
did.
did.
Yeah, he
Oh,
did.
that's so hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
oh
And then
man,
I
that's
woke up in a room alone, and I felt so mad because I was alone.
Wow.
And 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 somebody knocked on the door, and I thought it was going to be one of my family members whom I was angry with at this point. So somebody said, knock, knock. And I said, like, who is it? And a voice said, we have a visitor for you. And I thought, I can't think of anyone I want to see. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. But then a nurse walked in and she had Sierra, and she handed her to me, and I just melted.
Yeah.
All my anger went away. Everything went away. It was
Mm.
beautiful.
that's
That's so
awesome. You
sweet.
made me cry.
How How
Oh
long
my goodness.
after?
Oh, my mom doesn't cry, y'all. She doesn't do that.
That's
That's
so
true.
sweet. How long after, like, or I guess, how long were you in the room before you woke up and they brought you Sierra? Do you remember?
I have no idea. I don't, I wasn't even in recovery. I was
Oh,
in a room. So I don't even
interesting.
remember recovery. Oh, yes, I do remember recovery because I was in severe pain and they're making, they
Oh,
want you to cough before you can take a drink of water.
mhm.
And I couldn't cough. I was in pain. And I remember being so mad about that. And I looked at the nurse and I said, look, if I choke, I'll cough, but I can't, I don't want to cough right now. And I was, probably being a little, can you see it, say the B word on this? Uh, uh, and and then that's all I remember in there. And then I was in that room and I don't know how long they let me sleep in there before. I have no idea. It could have been
Wow.
an hour, it could have been 10 hours. I have no idea. I never
It's
asked.
really, it's interesting because I have a hard time coming out of anesthesia. And I think that you and I are similar, where it's like it might take more to put us under, but then it takes a while for us to come out. So I
Hmm.
wonder if
That's
that was
true.
kind of what you were experiencing was like, well, I guess we're just gonna let her wake up on her own then.
And in the C-section, when they just numb you, I was scared to death and they were like, they poke on your stomach. Can you feel it here? Can you feel it there? And I was saying, yes, I can feel when you're poking. And they said, well, where are we poking right now? And I told them exactly. And they were like, oh my God, she really can still feel this. So then they gave me more of whatever it was. And then at that point, I couldn't even feel myself breathe. I was
Yeah.
getting paranoid and my arms were like involuntarily flailing, like just jerking around, and they had to
Wow.
tie my arms down. And I mean, it was just more of the chaos of that whole labor and delivery.
It's so
Wow.
scary because
It was.
you're a 19-year-old kid. And although you're really excited about having this baby, you're now in this situation where you don't have your person, you don't have Grammy, you don't have whoever, no doula in there to like explain what's going on, to help you calm, like to use techniques to help with that all and to explain it's almost done or whatever. Like just having that person there during a C-section can be really helpful and grounding. And your arms are flailing and you are terrified of what's going on. And that's just so overwhelming. It's wild to think of you as somebody who's so in control and always very metered to like feel so out of control.
Hmm.
Think I would have described it then as feeling out of control. Um, because as a kid, you're in a lot of situations where you've
Yeah.
never been in them before, and you're kind of having to make your way through the dark, so to speak, on your own. Um, but it definitely was an out of control situation. But I wasn't like overwhelmed, like this is out of control. I was just, I had a lot, there was fear and there was anxiety and there was chaos. I don't have very many good descriptors to
Yeah.
to to put on those hours.
So when did people come find you? When did your family and people show back
I
up?
think it was very shortly after that. I
Okay.
think, yeah, it wasn't long at all. And I'm glad Sierra came in first because I,
They must have known
I was so
she's
calm
gonna
and
come out swinging.
I was so calm and I was so peaceful and so then
Oh,
when my family came in, all that anger was I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't even remember that I had felt angry.
oh, that's so good. I'm sure
Yeah.
that that would have been a very different experience if it had happened the flip way.
Yeah. And yes, I think so too. And Sierra she was born with hair still coming around her ears. You literally could put a comb through it. And it wasn't blonde hair, it was
Wow.
dark hair
Hmm.
and dark hair down her back.
Hmm.
Um, Looked like a little monkey that way. But
Hmm.
then she had this big, huge pot belly and these long, skinny arms and legs. So I thought she looked like a combo Kermit the Frog monkey because she was built like Kermit the Frog, and then she had all this crazy hair all
Aw.
over herself.
And how much did she end up
Like
weighing?
8 pounds 4 ounces. So
Wow.
she was a big baby.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had two over 8 pound babies myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. They run in families, man. That's so
Do they?
interesting.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't change. I mean, I guess I was just about to say I wouldn't change a thing about anything, but I think if I could change a thing, to have somebody like one of you two, and I'm not saying this gratuitously, but to have somebody like one of you to
Hmm.
help somebody through that, like the stark contrast between what you guys do and what my experience was. I don't think there's anybody on earth that would pick my experience over the experience somebody can have with a doula, or some kind of coach that knows what they're doing and knows what your body knows what you're going through better than you know what you're going through.
And I
Yeah.
think it's so, I mean, really like the doula profession has been around, for so long, but I think it's grown into popularity because of stories like yours where women like you go through experiences like that and they think, oh, gosh, what could I have done to make a difference in that situation, and then they do the work and then they have daughters like Sierra and I, and we you know do what we do now, and like all of that has grown from stories like
Yeah,
yours, because that was the norm for a long time, really.
it was the men got to sit out, like at the time that I was having Sierra, I think men were more involved. Like, my
Mhm.
Lamaze class was full of men with their wives that, everybody was, they were in sync, and
Mhm.
the men were trying to help. But, then when my mom had us, men waited out in the hallway and
Mhm.
completely hands off. And, the progression in just what, 3 generations is quite amazing.
Yeah, truly. I mean, yeah, it's so cool. Someday I would love to take a look back at the history of all of those things.
I bet you
So
if you Google like a
yeah.
birth back then, if there
Hmm.
are any videos of births back then versus a birth with a doula, that would be a pretty
Yeah.
interesting thing to watch. Yeah.
Definitely. I really think that like the invention of, or the, I guess the growing popularity of like Lamaze and Bradley classes really changed the landscape so much. Like Bradley is all about like partner. And now we're like, well, of course it's all about, partner supported exercises, but that wasn't the case back in,
No,
the 80s and 90s when these
not at
classes
all.
were growing. So
Yeah.
it was really like a revolutionary idea. Like, oh, the dad is also supposed to be there. They're also a part of this journey.
And that was looked down on. I mean, that was just like ridiculous.
Right.
Why do that? Well,
Hmm.
yeah, there was scrutiny about it. And that goes back to, there was also scrutiny. I said I felt pretty when I was pregnant, but I had to wear these tents over me myself. And then, flash forward 3 to 5 years, whenever that was, of Demi Moore,
Yeah.
where she celebrated the pregnancy. You were supposed to hide it. There was supposed to be nothing going on here, nothing beautiful, or you would
Hmm.
never say sexy associated
Yeah.
to a pregnancy. But, Demi Moore changed that. And I guess doulas are changing what people think about and expect during birth. You definitely can expect a lot more these days out of
Yeah.
You've
it
never
than you
been
could.
You've never been much of a rule follower. Like you
No.
beat your own path pretty well. So I'm actually kind of surprised that you wore the tents and you didn't just keep wearing your crop top with your belly out. I mean, you were doing backflips off the high
Oh,
dive when you
honey,
were
I
pregnant with
was like,
me.
I was a size 4 when I got pregnant, and I would have it would have been like the Hulk when he turns green. I had nothing. There was
That's
nothing I
so
could put
funny.
on my body that
It's like
I
that Friends episode where Rachel has that like top on and Ross is like, "Is that what you're gonna wear out of the house?" When she's like 9 months pregnant. She's like, "Do you
yeah,
want to fight me?" That's what I'm imagining
yeah,
here.
yeah, yes. And like I said, I couldn't put uh didn't know what I needed during labor, but also while I was pregnant, even though I was feeling pretty and I loved the whole experience of being pregnant. I hear people, oh, I can't wait to have this baby. And I guess at the very end, I felt like that because you get excited for it, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't. It wasn't because I wasn't enjoying the pregnancy. I enjoyed the pregnancy, and I didn't. I hated those clothes, but I wasn't imaginative enough to think. I just felt like, oh, this is what you have to wear.
Yeah. It's just part of
Um,
it.
I just
Yeah.
didn't have that creative imagination to go somewhere else. And boy, I think every
Yeah.
aspect of pregnancy has been improved, much improved over the last few decades.
How
Yeah.
was it? Okay, so you had a great pregnancy, you had a pretty
Mm-hmm.
crap delivery. And can you
Mm-hmm.
give us a quick little like, how was your postpartum?
Uh, it just was a beautiful life. I mean,
Have to switch back to that nice part.
Oh.
I didn't have, yeah, back to the nice part. I didn't have any postpartum symptoms. I was 19, so I mean, I have pictures of you when you're just a couple months old and I'm super skinny in a bikini again. It looks like I've never had a
Oh,
child.
to be
Um,
19 and postpartum.
exactly. I mean, it was gone.
Yeah.
I was back to Bruce Banner in 10 seconds flat.
And
So,
were you breastfeeding or were you bottle
mhm.
feeding? You were
I was
breastfeeding?
breastfeeding. I think I had probably a lot of like old world notions. Like I wanted to have a natural childbirth. I wanted to breastfeed, but I didn't really have the tools to make all of that possible for myself. Even my
Hmm.
coach, Donna, she didn't have the tools to help me through the labor.
Yeah.
Um, so I just lost my train of thought. Where were we going with
Breastfeeding.
that? Oh yeah, the breastfeeding. So I did breastfeed and I breastfed for about 3 months. And then I got really sick. I got a high fever.
Mm.
And I don't know if these days they would tell you not to breastfeed while you have the high
Mm,
fever, would they?
they
Nope.
wouldn't, that you would
See,
still do it.
they told me not to.
Yep.
And so that's kind of when it came to an end because I was sick for like a week and a half.
Mm.
Um, and by the time that week and a half was over, okay, now you're on a bottle, and
Yeah.
I haven't breastfed in a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your supply, I'm sure, was
Yeah.
gone at that
And
point.
breastfeeding was also a place where I had no coaching.
Yeah.
And you have this fear, like, is the baby getting enough food? This doesn't seem like you can't tell. You
Hmm.
feed them a bottle, they just drank 4 ounces. You're breastfeeding. I didn't have any confidence in whether or not Sierra was getting everything she needed.
Yeah.
Right. And
All of
at
these
that
things have
point,
changed so much.
yeah, well,
I
and at that
know.
point, like formula feeding was being pushed so heavily by the medical community. Like breastfeeding was like, ew, who would do that? And why?
I never bought into that.
Yeah.
I didn't, I remember that, but I didn't buy into that. I wanted to breastfeed.
Hmm.
Um, and I didn't think about this when you guys asked me on, but as we're going through because I haven't talked about all of this in so long, but as we're talking about it, and because I know so much about what you guys do, because Sierra is my daughter,
And we
as
talk
I'm telling
nonstop
these
about
stories,
birth.
yeah, as I'm telling these stories, I'm like, boy, I really could have used a doula, and boy, I probably needed some
Lactation
breastfeeding
consultant.
help, and I mean, I had all these things that, like I said, I didn't even know I needed them.
Hmm.
I,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so, but I
To go back
surely,
to what
surely would have needed them. Yeah.
what you said in the beginning, Sam, when you were like, I like to kind of connect and see how our lives like are affected by our births. One of the
Hmm.
things that I thought of was, the very first birth client I had as a doula was an 18-year-old girl in her senior year of high school giving her baby for adoption.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of interesting that that is the
That
first
was your
client I
journey.
serve
Yeah.
was someone who was my mom, about my mom's age, who made a different choice than my mom. But
Hmm.
pretty interesting that I got to then experience and give back because I did that birth for free. They offered to pay me and I was like, nope, you paid for the birth class. I'm going to do this part.
Hmm.
And
Very amazing
it
that you
just
did that. I didn't know that.
like, yeah, I like felt it felt
I knew you
like
helped
I
her. I
needed
didn't know you
to.
did it for free. Yeah.
Yeah, I just felt like I needed to. It was like, gosh, my mom was 18, 19, having a baby, and like she was keeping her baby, but this woman is going through even more
Oh,
emotional stuff to,
Hmm.
gift her baby to someone, another family. And it was so powerful. And her stepmom, oh my gosh, this just connected, you guys. Her
her
stepmom was her
stepmom
birth
was her
partner. I just
coach.
got chills all
That's funny.
over. Oh my
Wow.
gosh. And this is going to be coming out one day before that baby's birthday. I think that we're
Mm.
launching this one on the 10th, I think, of May is when this is slated to go because it's a Mother's Day episode. And that baby was born on Mother's Day weekend.
Mm.
So that is really interesting how that all comes full circle.
That's
That
so
girl was
awesome.
strong.
Oh, yeah. She was very
Yeah.
strong, very strong. So, well, thank you, Mom, for coming on and telling this. I know
Yeah.
this is out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I barrel through anything, but I'm not you're all about this and I sort of would rather be a wallflower in these situations.
The touchy-feely stuff, not so much. The mathematical black and white, you've got that down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
No,
true.
I think this was so great though. I think it's just it really is just so powerful, I think, to hear about I mean, one, Sierra's like origin story if we're going into Marvel things here, but also just like where we as a as a profession, I guess, kind of have been and where us as women have been and how far we've come and how some things are very similar and some things are very different. And I think it's just really powerful that, Sierra got to have such a different birth story for her own children. It's cool
Hmm.
to think of what our daughters someday will hopefully, there's so many things that, like, as doulas, Sierra and I are like, oh my gosh, like, this needs to improve. This is so terrible. This is so terrible. And we want better for our daughters. And it'll be so hopefully powerful to see
Yeah.
what they get to experience someday if and when they decide to have their own children.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like how I can't even think about how you guys could improve it now.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
oh,
but
we could
Sierra,
tell you
I
over
think
dinner,
We got a
Mom.
list.
I think your birth with Aspen was probably closer to my birth with you.
Hmm.
And then you were like, I'm not doing that again. And then your
Hmm.
birth with Anson was more closely associated to with
Mhm.
what you're doing for other people now,
And what you wanted, finally
but
came to
didn't even
fruition.
know
And
I
then,
wanted it. Yeah.
right. And,
Yep.
then we look back and it's like you got to be in the room for both of those births, which is really cool. And you got to see that kind of progression of how much further we were getting away from what happened to you. So
Mhm.
our
Hmm.
daughter has to have a home birth is basically what we're trying to say here.
Basically,
Um,
that is the progression.
And I'm older, so I'm like, I'm always thinking to myself, no, just go to the hospital.
I know you are. I know you are.
But you guys have it and you guys do it all the time and my hat's off to you.
Thank you, Mom, for being here. And next up is Samantha's mama. So bye, Mom.
Bye, guys.
All right, y'all. Now that we have heard from Sierra's mom, we're gonna have my mom tell us about her births. So thanks for coming on, Mom. If you're watching the YouTube, you can see she's sitting next to me here with us, and we are very excited to have her on. So do you want to start off by just telling us a little bit about you and your family? Me?
Okay.
Talk
I
about me, would you?
Talk about me.
I have had 5 babies, and all 5 pregnancies and birth stories are as completely unique and individual as the 5 little humans that it produced. And so my first was Samantha, and it was a fairly normal pregnancy. No one knew I was pregnant forever because I had strong, stomach muscles and didn't show until like
She was
7 months.
tiny. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
that's
didn't wear
funny.
maternity clothes until like seventh month or something.
Wow.
But then the week before she was due on a Monday, and on that Friday, I went in and the doctor said that my blood pressure was starting to rise and said, take it easy this weekend, keep an eye on your blood pressure. My mother was a nurse by training, and so she checked my blood pressure like every hour for the entire weekend.
She took her job very seriously.
Yeah.
So wait, what I'm getting from this is that my mom also had high blood pressure and Samantha's mom. So basically we make people's blood pressure go up is what you're trying to tell me.
Yeah. And actually, my girls, I was very, very nauseous. I like the first 5 months of the pregnancy, I was super nauseous with the girls and throwing up all the time. And with the boys, I would be nauseous, but not throwing up, just a little bit nauseous. And so my girls made me sick. Yeah. But anyway, so the blood pressure continued to rise through the weekend, and then we went in on Monday and they said, well, let's induce and let's not take a chance that it gets worse. And so we went out to dinner and had our last parentless evening together and went to the hospital and was induced, and she was born early the next morning. It was a pretty simple process. My body was ready to go into labor anyway, and so she was there by 7:30 in the morning. Pretty simple. 2 years later, I was pregnant with another child, and that was a whole nother story. That was a problem pregnancy from start to finish, and really a whole story of its own. But it was on bed rest for about a month, and then he was induced about 5 weeks early, and so he came early and tiny and a little sick, and had to work through all of that. So that was a whole different event. Baby number 3, that one I kept praying, God, I just want a normal pregnancy. Can I just have like normal pregnancy symptoms? And the doctor, for whatever reason, even though I had had problems with these other pregnancies, he didn't want to do an ultrasound. I had had to change doctors from insurance, and so he didn't want to do an ultrasound, and so I didn't know what we were going to find, and I was fairly convinced this was going to be 2 babies, because I mean, you know, at the end you either can't breathe or have no space for your bladder. I didn't have either. He was just, and I was sure it was going to be twins. He was so active and moving all the time, and I think I was wearing maternity clothes at like 2.5 months pregnant. And I mean, I was just convinced it was going to be 2. And instead, it was one that was just shy of 10 pounds. The labor was, I mean, the first contraction came while I was making breakfast for the other 2. And he was born before lunch. It was about a 3-hour labor and delivery.
I love that.
Yeah.
Amazing. Did you make it to the hospital?
I did. We got to the hospital because like as soon as the contractions started, they were like 2 minutes apart. So I called my mother-in-law, and she came and picked me up, and she took the kids, and
Because Dad wasn't home, right?
well, yeah, he was at work.
Yeah.
And so she came and we met with Greg, and she took the kids, and Greg took me to the hospital. And we get in, and the nurse is like, well, you're only at 3 centimeters, so you should leave. And I'm like, well, I live an hour from here, and this is baby number 3. I really don't want to leave. And she's like, fine, you can walk around. And so after she was like, walk for an hour and we'll check you again. And then after about 45 minutes, she says, you don't handle pain very well, do you? Because I couldn't walk through the pain anymore. Had to stop, and I would squat down, and I was trying to breathe. And yeah, it was kind of, I really
Right
wished
now,
I
my
knew
blood
what
pressure's
edema
rising.
was.
I know.
And so they finally took me back, and she's like, well, I'll check you. And by then the doctor didn't even make it. He got there a good 15-20 minutes after Jeremiah, because yeah, I was so far
They
along
didn't
by the
believe you
time
for
they
so
did.
long. And this, folks, is why even in a fast labor with a 3rd pregnancy, doulas can be so helpful, because then we can be like, hey, no, she's about to have a baby right now.
Yeah.
And
help
doing
advocate.
cervical exams,
Yeah.
right? We don't know that way, but we know you're like, we trust you and we trust your
Mhm.
body versus the
Yeah.
people who are just jaded and treat you like one in a million. And by the way, this makes me want to have my mother-in-law on because people also didn't believe her that she was in labor. So maybe we're gonna have to have a mother-in-law episode.
We might, yeah.
So yeah, so Jared came super fast, which was really fun because there were no drugs involved. And I mean, like I could have seriously gotten up after I had him and gone back to work. I mean, it was just, I felt so good. And of course, it was
Was
only,
that your first unmedicated one?
that was my first unmedicated one.
Okay.
And I was like, wow, what a difference that makes, you know? And so I was all about doing it without drugs after that. And then the fourth baby came along and she just had to do everything different from the start. Um, she was turned around, you know, so it was back labor and took a lot longer because of that, you know, but still, I think it was a total of like 7 hours still, and I feel like that was really long, but that I understand logically that for most people isn't, but to me that was long.
And with
7 hours of back labor is long.
Yeah,
When you're
and
feeling back labor, it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
they put me in a tub, in a hot tub thing, and you know, said if you sit in here for a while and that'll help her, you know. And so the doctor comes in, she's kind of talking to us, and she's getting ready to leave, and I said, I think I need to get out of the tub. And she's like, no, just stay there. And I said, no, I think I need to get out of this tub. And I'm like, Greg, get me out of the tub. And he's like, no, the doctor said to Greg, get me out of the tub. So they helped me
Nobody's
get out of the
listening to
tub.
me.
And I mean, water birth that wasn't a concept for me. I just didn't even get it. But so they get me into the bed, and then the nurse or the doctor is like standing there. She was there and she was like trying to get her gloves on, and she was like, don't push, don't push, don't push. Oh, don't push, don't push. And the nurse is getting on the other glove. Don't push, don't push, don't push. And there was a baby. So,
So was this at a hospital
oh yeah.
here in Austin?
Oh no, I was in
Oh, okay.
Fort Worth at the time.
Okay, I was gonna say a tub in the room. Loving that. Wish we still had that at
Yeah.
normal hospital rooms. That's awesome that you were able
Yeah.
to do that.
But it was, yeah, they still didn't quite believe that I was, because she had gone from like, again, 3 to 10 in a matter of, I don't know, 20 minutes or 15 minutes or
Wow.
something, super fast. And so there was that.
Yeah.
So then we had a 7-year gap and we had a surprise.
They were done. They were
bonus
done
round.
having babies.
We were done
Just are
having
being mean now.
and so then we have this bonus round I get pregnant with, and it was such a shock to the system. I was homeschooling 4 children at the time and working full time in the evenings, and my body was tired and overweight, and you know, in the mom phase of life, and my body wasn't having it. So I had a lot of problems with this pregnancy that were because of me. You know, when I had problems with Zach, it was because of the baby itself. And so it was a whole different ball game, because early on I had the nausea and throwing up, and we didn't tell anybody we were pregnant for the longest time with
didn't.
Joseph. And because, you know, you're a little bit embarrassed, you know, we've already got 4 kids, we can barely afford life, and here I am pregnant with a 5th child. And Sam says she figured it out because
She was throwing up so much, and like she would be like running to the bathroom at all hours of the day. And I think I was 13 or something at that point, and she would run to the bathroom and throw up. And my dad, who normally is he loves my mom. He's a very caring person, but he would just like look over the couch, and he'd be laying on the couch watching TV and be like, "You good?"
He was a little too comfortable with
He
her
was
throwing
so
up.
chill about it. And I'm like, why is my mom throwing up all the time?
and then I'd come back and make dinner some more. You
Yeah.
know?
I can't believe you hid it even from the kids. Like, I am the worst. The moment I was pregnant, basically, like I told my other kid, I
Yeah.
cannot keep a secret.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we were, well, honestly, it was probably 6 weeks after I had missed the period, and so I knew I was pregnant for a good 4 to 6 weeks before I even told Greg. I
Oh,
was,
I didn't know that.
yeah, I
Wow.
didn't, I was trying to convince myself I was in menopause. And just wasn't
At
another
30,
baby.
38.
At 38. I did, so I wasn't sure that having another baby was the right thing to do at that point in our life. We were in a very difficult situation. Greg had lost his job, and we were just really struggling financially. And then all of a sudden, whoa, here's a baby. You know, like, what?
Yeah.
No.
It was 2006, so it was like right at the beginning of like, the housing crisis and all these different things that were going on. So
Yeah, and Greg's in the
just a lot.
construction industry, so it highly affected him. And so it was just, I don't know. I didn't tell Greg until I was like 6 or 8 weeks
Oh, wow.
pregnant. And then it was another 2 months before we were willing to tell anyone else. And we had told the kids, and his parents were coming to visit. And so we felt like we had to tell the families because the kids wouldn't be able to keep a secret, right? So you have to tell the families. And so we told the families, and it just, yeah, I remember the first person that I told was the children's pastor at my church, because I knew he would be excited, and I needed somebody to be excited to help me get excited. I had a time about early on, maybe 3 months or something, where I had done something. I was, cleaning or doing something that I had pulled something, and so I was bleeding at night. And Greg was working an overnight job at that time, and I started bleeding very heavily, and it scared me. It absolutely freaked me out. And I called Greg, and he came rushing home, and we went to the hospital and left 13-year-old Samantha with
I also don't remember this.
all the sleeping children. I do remember waking you up and telling you, but we went to the hospital, and I think that was when it sunk in with us. This is a life. This is a life that we love already, and that was the change for me. That was the moment that it went from being, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant, what am I going to do, to this is a baby. This is going to bless our lives. This is going to be a wonderful thing. And from then on, I was very excited, and everything was fine with that. It just
And she wanted it to be twins. She kept saying, I really hope it's twins. I really want twins, so that he's not
alone.
like alone. He's not just like the youngest, kind of 7 years apart from anybody close
But see,
to him.
that's me. I am the youngest of 5, and I'm 7 years after, or 6.5 years after my sister. And I always felt lonely, and I always felt like, I was an only child with siblings, and I didn't want that for my child. So I really did hope that it would be twins, because it was way too hard of a pregnancy to try to do it again. And so, and I knew that, but it is what it is, and he is a total blessing. But then let's see, moving along with the pregnancy, trying to keep track. As the pregnancy progressed, because I was overweight and overactive and all of this, I began to develop high blood pressure. And so they eventually had me on medicines, lots and lots of medicine for the high blood pressure, and it wasn't slowing down. So they put me on bed rest, and I was on bed rest for, I don't know, 6 weeks or something.
Long
And because we had 4 children already, we just divided them up and sent them off to different places. We sent one to grandma's, and one to Aunt Lori's, and one to the other grandma's. And Samantha spent a couple of weeks at youth camp and on a youth trip, and in between she just got stuck with take care of mom duty. And so she was there a lot to help me out, and that was very good, because I wasn't allowed to get up for any, like, 10 minutes a day or something was my limit of being up. They had so total, and I had a friend that would come a couple times a week, and I would move from the bed to the floor, and then she would change the sheets on the bed and help me clean up a little bit and help me get back into bed and stuff like that. One thing that was really cool about that time period is that we had moved into a rental house that had a pool. And so the whole time I was on bed rest, we just like put it out there to all of our friends and said, hey, Greg's working all day, the kids are gone, but Bren needs food. So if you want to bring your kids over and swim in the pool, bring Bren some food and have some time in the pool. So that was
I like that, baiting them in. You're like bribing them with pool usage. I have a
had
pool, and
people there all the
I
time.
connect with that.
We did have people like I swear almost every day somebody came and brought us food, bring their whole family, and I'd sit in bed and eat while they would all play in the pool, and our kids would join if they were around, and it
Have a
was
pool and they will come. I come home sometimes and we did not plan on having a house full of people and we do. So yes, it is a great community builder for sure.
yeah, it
And then
was.
you didn't feel so lonely too, so that's nice.
Yeah, it was. I had friends that brought food, friends that would come and just clean for me and things like that. We also moved in the middle of like a week and a half before I got put on bed rest. And actually the doctor said, okay, I need you to take it really easy now. You're probably going to get put on bed rest before too much longer, but I need you to take it easy. And we were moving that weekend. And I was like,
Gotcha.
okay. So we worked real hard through the weekend and moved, and then I got put on bed rest. Surprise, surprise. So.
And I think it's important to push back a little bit on one piece of your narrative. You keep saying that your blood pressure was because of your weight, and that likely played a factor in it. But high blood pressure like that is, friends for that are listening, high blood pressure like what she was experiencing was preeclampsia,
Yes.
not gestational hypertension caused by maternal factors. So maternal factors can play a part in preeclampsia, but preeclampsia is primarily caused by the placenta, meaning that it was actually the baby's fault. Actually, we think the placenta, research is showing the placenta is mostly paternal DNA. So it was
Let's
dad's
just
fault.
blame dad. Yeah.
It's dad's fault that you were on bed rest.
But at the
love it.
time,
All the way
I
through.
was told that my weight had a lot
Right.
to do with it.
And
So
it probably had, some factors in it. But I just want anyone listening to be aware, just because you are a higher BMI does not mean that you're going to have preeclampsia. It's, a part of it, it's a portion of it, but it is certainly not the whole story.
yeah. And like I said, I had the blood pressure issues with you, and I was very
Teeny.
skinny. I was very skinny at the
Teeny
time.
tiny.
So, obviously wasn't related. But the whole mom guilt thing, you got to
Yeah.
take it all on yourself. So,
And that's funny because that's my mom too. She was like best shape of her life. She was 19 and like could bench press her own weight. And
Yeah.
then here she was with extreme preeclampsia, like all of a sudden out of nowhere and had to rush to a C-section. So
yeah.
It's kind of wild. Like that was your story with me. That was Eve's story with Sierra, and that was my story with Micah too. And all of us were really young and really thin, and like so. I think that just kind of goes to show.
That's true. That's true. I do blame it on myself, and I probably shouldn't. But anyway, so I don't know what I was saying though, where I was at in the story.
Bed rest for 6 weeks.
Bed rest for
and
6
and
weeks.
so how often were you going? I remember because I was 13, 14, however old I was at this point, and was home during the summer, but was 13 or 14, so I only cared like a little bit. I was more concerned with my own summer plans. So I remember you going to the doctor a lot, and it was a conversation a lot of like, okay, mom's blood pressure is really high, so the doctor's going to look at this, and it was a plan. I don't remember when the plan was hatched, but it was the plan that I was going to be there for the birth. And I don't remember when that happened, but we were all kind of paying attention to that. Like whenever you do have to go have the baby, I was going to go as well.
Right. We had decided, I don't know when, at what point, but we had decided that Samantha was at a stage where she was very interested in babies and very interested in my pregnancy. At least I felt like she was, maybe she wasn't, but I felt like she was. And so we had decided that she was old enough at 13 to accompany us and be there for the birth. And I don't know when that was decided, but you were also the only one in town at the time. So, we did work that into it and made that a plan. And when I was on bed rest, and then I was going to the doctors 2 or 3 times a week because I had the specialist that I had to go to once a week, and the regular doctor that I went to once a week, and sometimes twice for the specialist. And so, I was like, and our house had the bedrooms were all upstairs, and I was not allowed to do stairs except 3 times a week to go down the stairs to go to the doctor and then come back up. And so
It was
what's blowing
really
my mind about all of this is like Imagine, I mean, you have four other children at home. Not only are you not allowed to get out of bed to help them, but you're not even allowed to go up and down the stairs because you're like, that's how your house is. And you're having to go to two doctor appointments a week with
Mhm.
these four kids that you have to find help for.
Oh
Like,
yeah. That's
without a
why we
village,
sent them
this is
off.
impossible.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
why we sent them off. Grandmas and aunts and
yeah.
out of town. They were not in
For
town
6 weeks, for six
for
weeks.
weeks. At least 3 weeks, all of them were gone. It was very difficult because I was like, as soon as I'd had the baby, I was like, bring my babies home. I need all my babies home. I was like needing my
Fill
kids.
my nest. Yeah.
Yeah. And so um we went, they were doing all the, checking and making sure he was developed enough and as much as they could and stuff. But it eventually my blood pressure reached the point where they couldn't, they didn't want to wait. So they decided to induce and see if that would bring labor on, which
And how many weeks were you?
at 35, 34
Okay.
and a half, somewhere in there. I don't really remember. It's been too
It was
long.
34 because he was
34?
I remember he was 6 weeks early. That
Okay.
felt like such a big deal to me.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, it is a big deal.
But yeah, so we went to the hospital and they weren't sure if they were going to keep me. I was very, very drugged for the whole time I was at the hospital because they had me on all this magnesium and all these things that give you horrible headaches. And so then they had me on painkillers on top of it. So the whole week or two or whatever that I was in the hospital, I don't know. It's very foggy for me. So the majority of that birth story is just a big question mark in my head. And Greg and Sam probably have better stories of that than me. I do remember the actual labor. They had me laying down because of the magnesium. I couldn't, you can get up and
Can't get
stuff.
up, yeah.
So I'm laying down and they sat me up so that they could do the
Epidural.
epidural and because they thought they were going to have to do a C-section. And
Because
so,
she labored on magnesium for a long time before
Like-
she ever got the epidural.
like a day and a half or something.
A really,
Really
long
long
time.
time.
At 34 weeks pregnant.
Yeah, and so they were going to go ahead and just do a C-section, and so they sat me up, and the process of being upright sent the labor into craziness, and so they had a really hard time doing the epidural because they didn't want to do it during a contraction, and sitting me up started the contractions just one on top of the other. So they had a really hard time giving me the epidural. So they finally get the epidural in, and they're like, all right, we're just going to give that a minute to sit in your body for a minute, and then we'll take you into the OR.
Because her blood pressure was continuing to rise on the magnesium, so they decided that continuing labor wasn't going to be a good idea anymore.
I'm sure sitting up like that increased the blood pressure. But what's funny is you look back on it and you're like, wouldn't it be cool to know if they had sat you up a day earlier? Like,
Yeah.
would that have helped?
Exactly. So we're sitting there, and I said to the doctor, okay, this has been a really long time for me. What is it you're supposed to feel when you have the epidural and the baby's coming? And she's like, well, if you feel like you have to poo, like to push, that pressure is usually the pressure of the baby. And I'm like, okay, I feel that. And she's like, all right, just let me know when you do, if you do. And I was like, no, can you check? And she was like, well, okay, but I mean, again, kind of dismissing, or at least I felt that. And she, were you even in the room in that point? I
No,
think.
so they had kicked me. They decided they were going to do the epidural, and I had to leave because only my dad could be in there during the epidural. So I went down the hall and was like sitting somewhere talking. I think I was like texting or talking on my phone to my friends, And then my dad comes running down the hall and says, you have to come back right now. The baby's coming. And I was like, well, I know the baby's coming because they were about to take her to the OR for a C-section. I was like, I know the baby's coming. He's like, no, right now. And I was like, oh, okay. And I go running down the hall, and she's like up in stirrups, and the baby is like there almost. Like you could see the baby. It was
Yeah,
crazy.
I don't remember a lot of that other than having Greg go get Sam because I wanted her to experience it. Honestly, I think that whole experience had a lot to do with your interest in birth work.
Oh,
I
for
don't know.
sure.
I take credit for it anyway.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But then because he was so tiny, they sent him to the NICU, but but I was the one that was having medical issues. So my husband wanted to stay with me, and we got permission from the doctors to let Samantha go with the baby. So she actually went with
Oh my God.
I'm like gonna
I know,
cry.
it makes me tear up just thinking about it.
So she was actually with Joseph before I was. I mean, because they took him, and
As soon as he was born, he came out and went straight to the warmer, and I went with him over to the warmer. And I remember like holding his teeny tiny little hand that could barely wrap around my little pinky, and he was so tiny.
yeah,
Y'all, that is unheard of. Like, for
Yeah.
people listening to this, 13-year-olds don't get to go to the NICU.
No.
Like, they just don't.
Mm-mm.
That is so beautiful. And I love that, like, y'all didn't have to separate yourselves from him. Like, some of your family still got to be with him. Ugh.
Yeah.
Start my day with crying. You guys are the worst.
yeah, yeah. It was pretty. I was very happy that she didn't. And to be honest, for the first several years of that child's life, Samantha was very definitely his second mom.
He was my baby.
He was, which I always figured was good birth control for a teenager.
It was for sure. Yeah, I remember because you were on the magnesium for quite a while after you had him because your blood pressure was still so high, and they wouldn't let him be in the room with you unless there was somebody else in there. And I don't think they would have let this happen now. I'm pretty sure a 13-year-old would not count as a supervising person, but I guess they decided I was mature enough or something, because they let me stay at the hospital with her because my dad had to go home and take care of the other 3 children that are coming home to meet their brother, and so I would stay at the hospital with her and help her with the baby and bring her over to her at night.
They really would
stuff.
barely let me hold him at all. And I mean, like, he could be in the room and I could look at him, but I couldn't move. They wouldn't let me roll over. They wouldn't let me do anything. I had
And
to
you were
stay
on
on
so
my
many
back.
pain meds.
I was
too.
on so
She
many
was
pain
so high.
meds.
She was so high, y'all.
I really was.
She was. I remember when I got to the hospital when she was in labor, my dad was like, "I gotta tell you the story," and he was like, "She's been talking to the nurses and telling them that the room is flooding because like the water was like running in the bathroom and the pipes and stuff, and she would like start freaking out about it and be like, 'No, the room is flooding. The room
I do
is
remember
flooding.'"
that. I heard dripping water and I just was convinced that the room was flooding.
And the nurse, because the room was flooding, they were in the ocean. The nurse was a pirate. There was a parrot on her shoulder.
I don't
She
remember
was
any
real
of that.
concerned about that. It was a whole thing.
So glad
I
could
got
entertain my
13, you were
family.
like,
Oh, I thought it was the best.
Well,
bet.
the problem to me now that I look back on it is what was I doing
know.
to that poor child that's inside of me
Yeah.
and I'm still laboring with, and I'm so high.
Oh yeah, and you had so many medication, and you
So
so
much
much because
medication.
you delivered so fast. I'm sure he had really. I do remember they had to give him a lot of help, but in my mind it was just because he was so little. But it probably had a lot to do with the large amounts of IV medication.
Yeah.
He's fine now, folks. It's good.
Yeah, he's good, but it was very scary time for me, and but I felt very excited that you got to be part of that, so integral in the event.
I don't remember having any fear. It was like, yeah, this is what's happening. This is how babies come. It's all good.
Yeah,
Those 13-year-olds think they're invincible.
yeah.
They're like, it's really fine. My daughter was 7 when she was in my birth, and she was literally eating her Jimmy John's sandwich and chips, running out into the little waiting room, getting
Yeah.
a bite and coming back in. Like, no big deal. Just another
Doesn't
birth.
matter. Doesn't matter. Just a baby. It's just birth.
Yeah.
It's fine. Yeah.
My sister did home births, and she had her kids there for them, and I could never have. Yeah, I did a lot of things completely different from my sister. With Samantha, my sister had on her first labor, she had like some 30-something hours of labor and had done it at home, so there was no medications, and I was like, that ain't happening. The pain starts and you're giving me an epidural. That's all there is to it. And so I was all about that. But then even with her being induced, and it all came so fast. I mean, like I said, it was like 9 o'clock at night when I went to the hospital that night, and she was born by 7:30 in the morning, which for an epidural, for a induced pregnancy, that labor, that was really very fast. And so I kept thinking, well, that wasn't so bad. I probably could have done that without an epidural, like, you know? And so with the second one, it wasn't, I tried for a long time, but my body wasn't ready to have a baby.
Yeah.
So it took I mean, to me, it felt like forever, but it was probably 15 hours or something. And, you know, and so I didn't do it. So then when I got to that third one, I was like, I am not doing meds. And then I was like, wow, why does everybody not do it this way? This is the best way, you know?
Yeah.
So I
It's
will
very
say,
different.
I was going to tell the story with Zach. When at that time,
The second baby.
Yeah. Sorry. At that time, there was a lot, I mean, there was a lot of people that did not, the doctors and nurses weren't recognizing the importance of the mother-baby bonding. And when Zach was born, my second child, and it also was 5 weeks early or something, and he was also taken immediately to the NICU, and I didn't get to hold him or touch him or anything. They just took him immediately. And I wasn't having health issues at the time. So Greg had gone with him, and they had him in oxygen and also under lights. And they were like, he's not holding his body temperature. He's not, and I was freezing. I had like 8 blankets on me, and I was like shivering. I was so cold. And I remember once they said that his oxygen was starting to normalize, and so they wanted to let me hold it, because all day long I'm like, I want my baby, I want my baby, I want my baby. And they were finally gonna let me hold him for a few minutes, and they brought him wrapped up in, like, you know, all these blankets, and they said, do not unwrap him, he needs to stay in these blankets. And the nurse left the room, and I unwrapped him, and I just did skin to skin, and his body temperature regulated, my body temperature regulated, and when she came back, he was breathing normal, everything was so normal. And I have a friend who's a labor and delivery nurse, and she was like, that's so normal now. Even if a child is early, they want you to do skin to skin, and they want you to, because they recognized how that helps. But,
Yeah.
you know, with Zach, it was like, take him to the NICU. The NICU can help him more than anything else. And,
Right.
and so he was only in the NICU for 1 day, but it was about 12 hours before they let me have him. And it was,
The NICU for 1 day at 35 weeks is pretty impressive.
but yeah, but I needed my baby.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy how our instincts just kind of know what's needed, that physiology and, I don't know, nature of it.
Yeah. I believe, I very much believe in trusting your body because of my different experiences.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And then, so how was postpartum with Joe, with baby number 5?
that one was difficult because I had so much going on. With the others, I had nursed, and I nursed for a long time, like, you know, over a year with most of them. And with Joe, I never really got my milk in because, for one thing, like she was saying, I was on the magnesium for 5 days after he was born, and they wouldn't let me hold him. So, and they also didn't encourage pumping or anything. And so, you know, 5 days later, I'm finally allowed to try to nurse this child, and my milk never did come in really. And so I tried nursing him for about maybe 4 weeks or something, but he wasn't gaining weight, and he had lost even more. Like, they lose the weight when they first come home, and then he didn't gain back up. He stayed low and even lost a few more ounces. And so I gave up and had to nurse him. The postpartum was difficult with him because I was so busy with all of you. And I had all these babies or all these children, and all this activity going on, and I was exhausted, and I wasn't resting like I should have, and it was more difficult than with the others. Plus I was older, you know, the geriatric pregnancy at 38, and so I remember telling somebody, one of my OB was a woman, and she was 30, she was the same age as me, and she was pregnant with her first child. And I was like, I can feel the difference between pregnancy at 28 and pregnancy at 38. And she's like, don't tell me that, it's gonna be hard. And I was like, well, it may not be for you, but for me, my body was just like, I'm done with this.
And it is different, I think, too. We've talked, I think we were talking about that the other day, of like the difference, because we have a lot of clients who are, you know, advanced maternal age, geriatric pregnancy, whatever we're labeling it, at for their first pregnancies, and a lot of them do so well, and you would never know that they're, a higher risk pregnancy. But then we have others who are, 36 and having their third baby, and it's just so much harder on them. And I do think a lot of it is, I'm sure, like the physical wear down of our bodies, taking care of children, mothering is hard. But then also just comparing, I think probably is probably a lot of it too.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that like you said, for the first baby, you didn't show forever because like your muscles are all still tight and everything, you know? And then it's like with our subsequent kids, it's like our belly pops faster, we show more easily.
Mm.
And I think it is because it's like that muscle memory of our body. But then also, I feel like the relaxin that goes through your body each time, just like, it's like a snowball
Oh
effect. It's
yeah.
like, oh, I know what to do. Let me just do it. And then it's a
Yeah.
little bit more uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I remember with Joe too in your postpartum, I don't think he was sleeping much at night. He was difficult at night. And so dad had to go to work so early in the mornings, and so he would leave for work at like 6 a.m. and you would feed Joe right before he left, or dad would feed Joe, somebody would feed him, and then he'd bring him into me, and Joe and I would have an hour or two in the morning before the rest of the kids woke up, and that was my little mama time with with him. And it was so,
So
I
cool.
remember that so clearly, because he would, he'd come snuggle with me in bed while I would read, and then I'd take him downstairs and we'd do like breakfast or go sit outside by the pool, and I was just living my very best teenage motherhood
You
life.
were a birth doula and a postpartum doula
I
before you
was.
even knew it.
It was great. It was very sweet though. He was my
That's
baby.
special. My
Mhm.
brother was born, my dad and my stepmom had a kid when I was 14. And I was like bummed that I didn't get to be
Mhm.
there. You know, they lived in a different state and I would go visit and I got to visit the first Christmas. He was born in December and I was there a few weeks later and I remember giving him a bath and I loved
Mhm.
hanging out with him and I have pictures of us like holding hands in the car in the back seat of my dad's car and for
Mhm.
a while he thought I was great and now, I guess starting around 10, he was kind of over me. We did move
Yeah.
I don't know, we moved when he was maybe 6. And I really enjoyed or maybe he was like 3 and I enjoyed being around him at that point, but he kind of got over me. And so I didn't get to have like
I
that
did that.
longevity of a relationship because the age gap was really hard and we never lived in the same house. But you guys got to continue that
Hmm.
and like just build on that. And I just think that's so beautiful.
It was, yeah, it was sweet.
They're
He's,
still very close.
yeah, we are.
And he's fun. Our kids have been all over at your house playing and they
Oh
have so
yeah.
much fun with him because he's
Oh,
like
he's
that
so
young
good with my
spirit
kids.
still. So how old is he now?
17. He'll be 18 in a few months. I
Oh, your
can't
kids are
hardly
going to be
believe
out of your nest soon.
can't believe it.
It's
You used to
crazy.
want them to all come back.
Oh no,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
are. We're kind of in the return home
They've
phase.
Oh, you're in.
returned.
Oh, the return. I did that.
Yeah.
I returned home for a little bit. I fell out of my nest. I went back. Yeah, it happens.
It's a cycle. It's a cycle. Yeah, Joe and I always have been very sweet. I remember. I don't even feel like I ever let you hold him when we were out in like public. He was mine. I would carry him around with me at church. Everybody thought he was my kid. Uh,
I remember one time we were they were doing the Love Can Wait thing with the teenagers, and it ends with this ceremony where you promise that you won't have sex until you're married, right? And so
I
we
remember
walk
this.
into this ceremony and Samantha's carrying
yeah, they
Joseph.
thought it was like a recommitment ceremony for me.
I, I just remember
Love
that
didn't
people were
wait, but
looking at her.
she's gonna try again, guys.
It's fine. It's fine.
That's awesome.
Oh Lord. Yeah, yeah, he was always my guy. And now he just loves my babies, and
He
he comes and
does.
hangs out with them. Yeah, he's their absolute favorite. So, it's great.
Yeah, that's so sweet. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on and telling us about this. This has been so neat to hear both of our mom stories. I just love it.
Yeah, this has been
Yeah.
awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us for this very wonderful Mother's Day episode, and tune in soon to hear more about other things.
Tune in a couple of weeks to hear the Father's Day episode.
Oh yeah, that one's going to be real stellar.
All right, bye
Thank you for
y'all.
having me.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on Birth, baby. Thanks again to Longing for Orpheus for our music. You can look him up on Spotify. Remember to leave a review, share, and follow wherever you get your podcasts. See you next week.